Hi, Anthony Parente from the Region Appeal. Today we're going to talk about the Hanlan Feeder Main project.
Hi, my name is Durdle. I work with the Region Appeal. I'm the Hanlan Water Project Ambassador, and I'm going to talk about solutions to some of the challenges we faced at the Hanlan Water Project.
The title of the presentation is Large Diameter Pipes in the Urban and Political Jungle. Please join me in welcoming Anthony Parente. By the way, Anthony and Scott said that they would welcome questions during the course of the presentation. We are on somewhat of a time schedule. The Blue Jays kick off at 4:07, I believe.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for having us. Can everyone hear me? No? I'm just allowed to tell you something. Just holler at me, please. Louder. Okay. I'll try to be louder. Again, thanks for having us. I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro on who we are and the project itself before turning it over to Scott this afternoon as well. So we're the Region Appeal. We're the polite next-door neighbor to the City of Toronto here, and we have our member municipalities are the City of Mississauga, the City of Brampton, and the Town of Caledon. Quite a large area, almost 1,250 square kilometers from the lake to Highway 9, basically Highway 427 all the way to Winston Churchill and beyond. So we have a very large area to deal with. In 1991, our population was 800,000, and that increased in 2011 to 1.3 million. Our projected population in 2031 is almost 2.3 million. At one point in time, when I first joined the region, we were growing at over 30,000 persons per year. So I'm from Orangeville, and we're less than 30,000, so the equivalent of one Orangeville every year. So it was quite the growth that we are supporting on the region side here. So I'll tell you a little about our project back in 2008. Our master plan, our servicing master plan, identified the need for significant increase in capacity of our water transmission system from one of our treatment plants on the shores of Lake Ontario on East Avenue. You may know it if you live in Mississauga or been to Mississauga by Lakefront Promenade Park. Ours is the big gray and orange facility there. It's a rather pretty facility now. So this is the largest and most extensive project that the region has ever undertaken in a single job. The first of which is it's very little bit difficult to see here, but it's our Hanlan transmission main. Starts on the shores of Lake Ontario there, runs east along Lakeshore to Dixie Road, runs north from Dixie all the way to Eastgate Parkway, over to Tompkin, and then north to our Hanlan Reservoir, which is just near the 401 and 410 interchange. Also included in that project is our Mississauga City Centre subtransmission main, which is a 60-inch pipeline running back from the pumping station to support the development of downtown Mississauga. If anyone remembers, 30 years ago, probably the largest building in downtown Mississauga was probably a 6 or 8-story building, and now we're raising the roof on 55+ stories in downtown Mississauga. So, also included in the project is another 13 kilometers of local distribution pipeline. What we've tried to do is integrate a lot of our state of good repair projects within one mega project here to reduce the impact on our residents. And as well, briefly, we wanted to talk about another major project that the region has ongoing, that be the West Trunk Sanitary Sewer. Very similar in size, almost 10-kilometer pipeline running down Erin Mills Parkway. For those of you who are familiar with the west side, you may see some random shafts there in Mississauga and wonder what the heck the region is doing way underground. On that side of the fence, we're installing similarly a 96-inch or 8-foot diameter wastewater main to convey sewage back down to our Clarkson wastewater treatment plant. A little bit about the difference of the two projects. Again, Hanlan running up almost about 21 kilometers of pipeline, the West Trunk about 10. Most of the Hanlan project, about 2/3 of it, is being done as a rock tunnel. We strategically selected this alignment to leverage the capacity of our industry in the local area, which has significant ability to tunnel in sound rock conditions. We did the same thing on our West Trunk sewer. Total cost of the project on the Hanlan Water Project is coming in about $480 million. We still have a couple of smaller tenders to still build after the main three, which are underway right now. Our West Trunk sewer about $210 million. So we're upwards of almost $1 billion just with these two major projects for the region. Why is it needed? Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with what downtown Mississauga looks like from the south there, or from the west, from the east side actually, the Sussex side. Critical to meet the demands of our future and improve growth, including Mississauga City Centre here, to service York Region as well. For those of you who don't know, we have a servicing agreement with the region of York, which started off back in 2006 at about 5 million liters of water per day, and by 2031 we'll be supplying them 331 million liters of water per day as well. So part of our capacity here is dedicated for the region of York and also paid for in part by the region of York. Okay. In addition, we try to take down, we have an existing 84-inch or 7-foot diameter pipeline that runs from the lake up to our Hanlan Reservoir. We try to take that out of service to do an inspection on it back in 2006, and we couldn't do it for 1 week without our reservoirs almost running dry. So we have some challenges here. Very little redundancy, which makes it a challenge for us. If we ever had a break on that major line, we'd be in really deep trouble, as that one services upwards of 800,000 residents right now.
What do you guys do for servicing it?
For servicing?
The pipeline.
We do a lot. We have quite a intricate condition assessment program that we're doing right now on our pipelines, where we do, the backbone of our system is concrete pressure pipe, for those of you who are familiar. It's a AWW AC304 standard design pipeline. So there's a way you can go through and use any current electromagnetic type inspection to detect wire breaks. And usually those wire breaks are indicative of corrosion on the outside of your pipeline and stalling. So we actually have quite an intricate program on condition assessment as well. Sorry, we didn't add it at the beginning. If you have any questions, by all means, ask us at any point in time. We're trying to keep this light and informal if at all possible. So what did we do? We started with the class environmental assessment back in 2009, and what was really unique about that process is, and this just goes to show you how easily things change, is the route was selected to save money. Okay? Strictly to save money. Very, very little input was given towards what impact this project was going to have on the residents who lived there and the residents who traversed through Mississauga. And because of that, we try to maximize the open cut. And that means cut and cover. We go down the middle of your street with a big giant excavator, drop a big pipe in it, in an 11 to 12 foot wide trench, and then try to rehabilitate the road. So we didn't really have much on the impacts to public assessed during that process, unfortunately. And that was very much changed as the project evolved. You understand, people don't really seem to care very much about public sector type projects until you put a shovel in the ground. When you put a shovel in the ground, everybody comes out of their house and starts yelling at you. That's how hard it's got. A lot of that was changed in addition by our very formalized value engineering process. And I have to say that was one of the bright spots of this, where we brought a lot of very technically sound people to the table to critique our designs very early in the process, to try to get us to rethink some of the aspects of design. We had some very senior people around this table who said you guys were nuts to be considering some of the things that you wanted to do. For example, we looked at Dixie Road, and Dixie Road, for those of you who know, south of Burnfort Road is a 2-lane road in each direction, right? Or was, in part. And especially south of the QEW, and we were going to put not only an 8-foot diameter pipe in it, but in some sections we were going to put a 2-foot pipe right beside it. And When we looked at the logistics of what that trench width was going to look like, we were better off to just close the road, because really there was nothing much left of the road after we did that. So a lot of those things we thought we had right during the EA, but we really didn't. So the value engineering process certainly assisted us a long way in developing that. So some of the challenges we had, again, we wanted to not just look at what the EA said about project costs, we really wanted to balance what the impact was going to be for residents. We knew we could tunnel this project and we knew it would have additional risk, but through formalized risk assessment, we felt that we were actually going to be able to manage those risks. The region, as a public sector group, was able to accept a lot of these risk management things that normally contractors don't like to take on. And we spent a lot of time developing formalized risk assessment for the project. We thought at the time that although open cut was going to be more disruptive, we felt that typically it was going to be less expensive. We found out otherwise after.
What's open cut?
Open cut would be cut and cover, digging a hole, putting the pipe in, dropping it back in, and restoring a road.
What are the other options?
Tunnel.
Oh, like boring.
Right. And that's what a lot of this project ended up being, was formalized tunneling. We actually spent some time using NRC socioeconomic models to look at what the actual impact of our work was going to be, what the actual physical cost of the community was going to be. And those models exist, although a lot of them are untested. We actually spent a lot of time looking at these as well. Another curious part of the project was, of course, our funding was entirely based on development charges. And we were under a lot of pressure from the development community to reduce our development cost impact. So we couldn't just design this grandiose type facility or this construction project and pass that cost along to our developers. They really wanted to make sure we were spending money in the right places. And again, as I mentioned, we found from a challenging standpoint, it was very difficult to engage the public until you put the shovel in the ground. Now pass it over to Scott, he's going to talk about some of the solutions we had.
Thanks, Anthony. So despite the design with the value engineering and everything, converting a lot of the feeder main installation to tunneling, which is limited based on your public perception to shaft locations. You'll see these compounds set up with hoarding, and then you don't know what's actually going on under the ground, but there's a big boring machine digging this tunnel under the road, and your traffic isn't impacted, so you're not reducing lanes or anything like that. You just have these compounds every once in a while along the right of way. It's very minimal impact versus what you see in these two photos is open cut. This is what Anthony was explaining, is the machine going through the intersection and physically removing the earth so we can drop the pipe in from above ground. So this photo on the bottom left you can see is actually Dixie and Bloor Street. We had to take it down to one lane in all directions with no turns, no left turns. When it comes to evaluating this impact, like Anthony said, the models are very difficult to necessarily forecast what kind of impact they will have. So I guess it was Councillor and the region decided to hire ambassadors for this job to help mitigate the risks and impacts during construction. That's where we come in. So there's a very collaborative approach to this Hanlan project. It's the first project in the region of Peel that actually hired specific ambassadors to liaise with the public and deal with the business complaints and direct communication to the councillor's office for any issues that they feel relate to the project. We had very well thought out traffic management plans. For example, between Eastgate and Dundas on Dixie, instead of putting the feeder main, the open cut section of the feeder main, on one side of the road or the other, we decided to put it up the very middle so that all driveway accesses to all the businesses and malls along the road would be maintained. This facilitated greater access to the businesses and less economic impact to them during construction. I personally live downtown Toronto right on Queens Quay, and as you may know, there's been a Queens Quay revitalization project ongoing for the past 4 years. And in this project, for example, they took 4 lanes of traffic down to one in one direction with minimal sidewalk access. And it's always a negative aspect to big construction projects like this is you see these businesses drop off, all the for rent signs start coming up and things like that, and it's not good for the neighborhood in terms of the short term, albeit it may be beneficial for the long term. But you know, with this approach, these proactive traffic management plans, we try to mitigate that impact to our residences and businesses along the road. Public relations. So we have a number of public relations tools that we use. I'll get into those in the next few slides. Our designers and project managers, we're also thinking about this in terms of solutions when we have such a complex project. How do we divide it up? Anthony mentioned there's a few different contracts to execute this one project. There's 3 main feeder main contracts. So that's to better facilitate the existing resources in the market. So what are the contractors' capabilities? How long would it take to build this project if we only went with 1 contractor versus 3 simultaneously doing different sections? Sure, there's some extra coordination and collaboration where those projects meet, but in terms of getting the job done quicker and more cost efficiently, it was the best route to go. So just some different aspects of solutions to this challenging project. Although there's 3 contracts, the project is divided into north and south. The south contracts have a different consultant and project team than the north contract. There's a bit of collaboration, obviously, but it makes the project faster to execute, more cost efficient, more easy to control in terms of project size and the costs associated with each contract. We have weekly progress meetings where the contractors are involved. We also engage the City of Mississauga, the transit officials, and multiple other stakeholders that need to be kept abreast of the impacts that they can forecast in the next few weeks. So we're keeping a lot of parties involved. And yeah, these are all tools that help ensure that we implement the project on time and on budget. Our public relations toolbox has a number of I guess, facets in it. One of which is the Hanlan Ambassadors. That's me. So my name goes out on all the project notices for all the Hanlan South contracts. Deal with any of the one-on-one questions from the residences and business and any other stakeholders that may be impacted. We also have our Business and Institutional Care program. The BIC program was actually implemented before the start of the construction to better gauge the needs and requirements of those parties that would be affected along the routes. So ambassadors would set up one-on-one appointments with the business owners, the schools, the residences, anybody who requested a one-on-one meeting, just to gauge their access, the number of trucks they use, the turning restrictions, the business operation hours, when can we not turn the water off to do connections when we're doing the local water main distribution. And certainly some of these special users, their needs were actually integrated into the contracts before they went out to tender. So if we had to operate at night, crossing some of their sections, then these special needs were considered long before the contract was actually tendered. We also maintain a very active website that posts our Twitter feed on there. And this you can go to, or any of the residences or businesses can go to get project updates. They can see exactly where construction is ongoing, when it's upcoming in their area. And if they're curious as to know how much longer we'll be in an area, all this information can be found there. So we have a team of communication professionals in our office that help maintain this with the support of the ambassadors and the site inspectors that keeps them abreast. We have a traffic hotline for all those people traveling along the route. We maintain this hotline daily, so we advise people who call in, which is not many, but we do have quite a few regulars, as to what the lane impacts will be and things like that. So this is kind of over and above, right, your typical construction project. And generally it's been received very well. For those impacted along the route, we've received a lot of positive feedback despite the typical, yells and arm fist waves that come when you're putting the shovels in the ground, like Anthony mentioned. So it's nice to always receive that positive feedback, albeit it doesn't happen as often as the negative, but hence construction. We have Bluetooth travel time signs. So these are signs that we've set up along the route, similar to what you see on the highways right now. After the Pan Am Games, they've left some of them up, which is great. So we have these along our routes. Whenever we reduce lanes, we can advise people as to how long it's going to take from one side of the project to the other when you're going through some work. So giving people the option to take a detour if they aren't actually reaching a local access business along the route. And we also do a contractor initiation workshop. This is where myself or David LaRue, the other Hanlan ambassador, will either directly present to any of the new subcontractors or personnel that are working along the site and explain to them the expectations and what is Hanlan, so that all the workers along our job site know that they have the expectation that if they get approached by a public member, how they should answer questions, And if they can't answer the questions, explain to them our role and pass along our business cards. So a lot of the time this has worked out in our favor because residents typically approach construction workers with a complaint. And if they deal with it proactively by having this construction initiation workshop training, we can often mitigate that complaint concern right away, which is great. So it's worked out well in our favor. And we have a paid duty police program. So we've trained our officers that are doing traffic control in the area as to what Hanlan is and what we're expecting them to do. So this has helped out in terms of mitigating traffic controls. So here's myself and David Abreu, the other Hanlan ambassador for Hanlan North. We take an innovative approach. Like I mentioned, there's only us in terms of ambassadors for the region of Peel. So it's a unique approach that we're evaluating on this project. We're both technically sound in our background, so I'm a civil engineer and David Abreu is a CET. And so we can both explain to all those people that have questions about the project, kind of the inner workings of it, as well as help mitigate any of the concerns that they have. Here's a bit of data on our businesses along the route. So we collected all the information, and this just goes to show you we actively manage the complaints that come in. So if we get reoccurring complaints such as dust in certain areas or sound, things like this, then we can actually change our approach in the future. If it's a one-off, you deal with it as it comes. But if we get repeating concerns or complaints, then this management practice allows us to proactively change our approach so we can avoid future repeat concerns. As I mentioned, some businesses along the road were very impressed with how proactive we were with the Business and Institutional Key-Up program and our proactive approach to noticing them and giving them lots of alerts as to when we would be there and what to expect. But obviously, once the shovel's in the ground, it's a bit of a different story, right? It's hard for businesses to forecast the impact of our traffic control before it's actually in place, and driver habits change. People avoid the route in some cases, and we do have an impact. There's no question about it. But treating everyone fairly and ensuring we're doing our part to address their concerns is the approach we take. So. We haven't actually had any claims go all the way up to the municipal board, so which is great. That's kind of a success in my opinion. So we've worked with the businesses as best as we could, and we feel like we've done a good job in mitigating the impacts by the way we've designed it and executed it in the field. This is a couple snapshots of our website, and here we post all our updates. These are updates that are locally distributed to residences and businesses as well. We also have photos as well as a travel time map. So all those Bluetooth signs that are telling you distances or times to get between certain parts, you can actually check them on the website before you leave. Very unique approach on this job. And here's the zoom in. We have live traffic cameras along the route as well. If you're curious to see what to expect when you're traveling through the area, you can get an idea ahead of time if you visit the website. Not everybody does this, but we do get some regular traffic as well. It's an interesting way to see kind of what's going on.
Are they your own cameras as opposed to the Ministry of Transport?
That's correct. So they were purchased specifically for the Hanlan Water Project, and at the end, the city of Mississauga is going to inherit them and use them in their infrastructure. So whether or not they'll be as part of the MCO's website, the end is still yet to be determined, but they will have use afterwards, which is great. Our Twitter feed keeps it light and humorous a bit. We have a great communication staff in-house that maintains our Twitter feed based on information she learns in the field from us and herself when she performs site visits. So we're constantly updating pictures of the project's progress, such as the one in the bottom left. You see one of the tunnel boring machines coming out of the hole, and she said, cleaning Celtic Tiger's teeth, and this is the TBM called the Celtic Tiger. It's from the 60s. It helped do our Contract 1 tunnel, which is all the way from Lakefront Promenade up to Eastgate on Dixie. And here it's completing its run, and they're just giving it a clean before sending it back to the shop. This is the initiation workshop summary that I chatted about. It's making sure that all the subs that show up on site aren't doing things like this forever. It's like blocking driveway access or responding to concerned residents in a negative manner. They know that we're here to help them, let them do their job more efficiently. So if they they can't answer the question, they come to us, and it's worked out quite well. The paid duty police I've touched on, but in terms of lessons learned, from an overall project perspective, I'll pass it back to Anthony to finish up here, and then we'll open the table to any questions you guys may have.
It's really important to recognize, and it's maybe even underestimated here, is the usefulness of the project ambassador. The ambassadors actually, we gave them clout inside the actual contracts themselves. They are the residents in the businesses, they are their advocates. So Scott and Dave actually have the authority on site to stop construction if they see an example like you saw in the previous picture. So we thought by giving them the clout, even inside the specifications, the contractor can't argue. They formally accepted the fact that it says the ambassadors shall rule over all others in the field when it comes to matters of public advocacy. So it was kind of a very unique process. In addition, the paid duty program that we had found in previous paid duty applications, as officers would come up there, they would sit in their cars and leave their lights on. Well, we actually developed, as Scott mentioned, a training program for any pay duty officers who wanted to sign up for pay duties as part of the Hanlan project. And they had to pass a test at the end of the training program, or else they don't qualify for Hanlan pay duties. It's really important because their job is to assist the ambassadors, assist the traveling public. If they see something like that, they need to know. They need to do something about it. So it was a very important and very successful program to date as part of the project. Going back to some of the lessons learned, of course, as I mentioned before, balancing between project costs, our costs of the region, and economic costs has been quite a bit of a challenge. It can be very difficult to defend politically. As you imagine, or can imagine, there was a lot of people who came to the table and lobbied politicians on this project, lobbied for construction methodology changes, lobbied for materials usage on this project. Everybody seemed to want in and want part of it. So it became very political to actually come up with a formalized document in the end. Some of our specifications seemed to really help. We came up with a number of innovative specifications, including what we call VECP, a Value Engineering Change Proposal, where we allowed the contractor to come back with change proposals to the original contract, and then the cost savings would be shared, 50-50, contractor versus region. So we wanted to encourage innovations even from our original specifications. There's a lot of things we went out on a limb on, and it took a lot to convince our lawyers, even in the region appeal, that this was sound specifications and changes to our general conditions of contract. For our project managers, of course, what we found is, what we always say applying the pillars of project management is highly, highly relevant. The internal core team became very close-knit and had to spend a lot of time working on these. Spent a lot of time taking public criticism from politicians whose residents and businesses were going to be affected. So what we found is it's absolutely essential for our project managements to have that PMP or project management professional background and training to be able to make it through a project of this magnitude. Risk assessment and risk mitigation, risk assignment. Investing in information became one area where we found our value engineering clearly noted the region had an opportunity to save money here if we provided sound information to the contractors. We invested probably 4 times that of a project of this magnitude would on geotechnical baseline data. Right? We spent an enormous amount of money doing that, to the point that contractors actually came to us during bidding and said they had never ever seen a project with this much information provided for bidding. And what that ended up doing was saving us money. They bid out that risk. And even after we had that data, we baselined it in accordance with the ASCE guidelines for geotechnical baseline reports. And we used that. And the risk was off the contractors. The owners own the ground. Right? But we tried to mitigate any risk they had of bidding, and it certainly paid off significantly in bidding time. Original estimates for this project were well over the 500 million range, and we probably shaved about 60 to 80 million dollars in savings just at bidding time alone. Some suggestions for improvement. We've noted this quite consistently. Earlier stakeholder engagement. It's very, very difficult to get people to come out. It wasn't very difficult to get businesses and the cities involved. We could have spent even more time. One of the big issues we actually experienced was My Way, the Mississauga transit system, came out swinging at us once we started construction. We said, well, hold on, we're willing to talk. And what we ended up doing is farming them money to support additional staff, additional buses at their discretion, provided there was traffic backups. So there's some people you can engage and some people you can't engage. But maybe more earlier application of that certainly would have helped. Sometimes making others accountable was a real challenge here. Politicians want to say something and then say they didn't halfway through the job. When there's money at the table, they want to say, put their involvement. When it would cost too much, they want to run away and blame it on everybody else. So keeping them honest was certainly challenging in this. Allocation of scope to consultants. Those of you who are in the consulting field know that many a times your clients try to pass along responsibilities for project-related work inside original scope of work. And we found out really wasn't a success because everybody in private industry wants to minimize their expenditure on any sub-consultants that they bring in for a project. And we found that, and this was the last project we'll ever do that on, from here on in, the region can accept that risk. We can manage getting data, getting additional geotech done much more effectively ourselves and let the consultant say, this is what you should do, rather than the consultant having to pay the bill. So that was certainly a big lesson learned for us. Some conclusions here. Of course, thorough project planning and execution have proved to be beneficial. Early and more rigorous community engagement and continual engagement of community and politicians. This is two of our local politicians here on the site. Proves to be very beneficial. You take a picture of a politician and get it on their website, they tend to love you. It gets them votes in the municipal elections, and they were quite happy. Councillor Fonseca here on the left managed, even despite this project going on in her ward, to get re-elected on the previous municipal elections. So spent a lot of time in her office. And that's the basics of our presentation. I hope there's hundreds of questions or none.
We'll be back. This group is not going to be back.
I wondered, I may have missed it, but I wondered if the word safety on any of your slides. And what comes to mind is in the last 2 weeks, there was a fatality in Sudbury, and an elderly lady was killed by a big grader right in the street workplace, which has been going on for about a year. So my question is, did you know about this? And B, what provision did it reinforce anything that you're already doing to take another look at it from the safety point of view? Because right now, they got the city council, they got the alderman for the area, they got the police department for where were you on the traffic, they got the consultant, they got the contractor. Who's going to take the responsibility?
It's actually a very good question, and it's a very challenging one for us as the owner to deal with, as you probably know. Because occupational health and safety is regulated by the Act, and then as a constructor, we mandate that Act on the constructor, right? So usually site-related safety or site-specific safety is not part of our mandate. That being said, you're 100% correct. We cannot walk away from those responsibilities. And I don't care if it's on the ground when we have a grader, or a little skid steer going across a sidewalk or a TBM in the ground. We've had a number of incidents, major related incidents on the site. Thankfully, no fatalities yet, thank God. But what we've tried to do is for the one contractor where they had 2 incidents 1 week in a row, what we said is, you have a choice. You're either going to provide a proper investigation of that, amend your policies and procedures, or we're going to do it for you. And I mean, we will bring in a third-party safety consultant, and that would mandate the region becomes the constructor under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and we were willing to do that to such a point that we've done it before at the region, and contractors hate us for doing it because the safety consultant comes in, and within 5 minutes, he's dismissed at least 10 people off the job site for infractions. And we said to this contractor, either you amend your procedures and provide that to us, or we'll do that. So we haven't had an accident on that job site now in, it's got to be 4 or 5 months. But it is a tough one to deal with, and the ambassadors are really mandated with the surface-related safety aspects, whether that be driveway access, sidewalk access. We can't do much about work at the TBM phases, other than what I suggested. With the ambassadors there, plus additional region inspectors, we try to take a more proactive approach to site safety. But it's a good question.
Where do you meter the water that's coming? And how essential is it to know how much water is going from the plant and how much might be going to York? And how much treatment is needed, chlorine, etc.
Okay, there's a number of questions, and I'll do the metering first. The metering is all done at either the water treatment plant or the individual pumping stations where we have it. And those meters are extremely accurate across a very wide flow range. We absolutely need to meter every drop because A, it goes back to a regulatory issue with the Ministry of the Environment, MOECC now, right? That we have to meter all our water takings from the lake, and then because it's a sales aspect, we're just selling water to the customer. So we need to know how much water we produce and distribute versus how much revenue comes in from billing meters. And the difference between that two represents unaccounted for water. We don't call it lost water anymore. The bottom line, it is lost water. Everything we do, including when we fill water mains for pressure testing, gets metered now. Everything, because we have to minimize that number. We have to demonstrate that the true unaccounted water is as low as possible. And then we measure ourselves during national benchmarking to see what our lost water is.
Are the meters Venturis?
No, well, typically we use Venturis. We now use what are called V-cone, which is an inverted type Venturi pressure differential meter. We use magnetic flow meters, which tend to be very accurate as well. So there's a number of different metering technologies we're using. We're venturing into pulse Doppler systems now as well, which are really revolutionary type, but very accurate if you can get them going properly. So there's a number of different technologies we use on metering, including Venturis.
Another question? Yes, Paul.
What's the projected life of one of these things, and what will anybody do when you come to that end of life?
Well, the feeder mains, the 8-foot pipe that we're putting under the ground is projected, it has a design life of 100 years. So obviously there's regular maintenance and condition assessment during that period. And based on where our drain chambers are and access ports, you can actually take the feeder main down in 12 hours if you had to do a dry condition assessment and have somebody in the pipe. And that probably won't happen for at least 50 years. So this pipe will probably be in service for 50 years before anyone actually looks inside of it again, because we have internal condition assessment infrastructure within the pipe as it's live, doing real-time data monitoring, just to look for wire breaks or any potential pinhole leaks, things like this. But the design life is 100 years, and yeah, that's kind of what we're forecasting. So
That's the goal. One thing that Scott mentioned we're doing is using fiber optics now inside the pipeline to actually act more as a real-time condition assessment tool, right? To tell us what's going on. It's a new technology, relatively new in Canada, been much more employed in the US and overseas, and we're trying to implement it for the first time on this pipeline and then hopefully roll that out onto other pipelines within the region.
Bob, you had a question?
I'm most impressed, and it's all new to me, the material you described, particularly the Ambassador program. How leading edge is it? Is Toronto doing it, for example, or is Hamilton, or are you ahead of everybody or behind? behind everybody, or where do you stand with respect to similar projects in other jurisdictions?
Sure. I kind of hopped into the role, not necessarily knowing what to expect or what the history of the ambassador role was, but from what I've learned is it was applied in Florida during their basement flooding rehabilitation program with a similar consultant. It was a division of CH2 Hill, who is a consultant on one of the Hanlan contracts. And they had great success in Florida with it, and brought it up to Toronto recently with the Toronto basement flooding program that was ongoing with CH2 Hill. And it was their initial suggestion, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, that Hanlan consider it based on its socio-economical impact and some of the routes that we were going down. And this is the first project in Peel, but except for Toronto and a bit of the basement flooding where it was rolled out in a smaller capacity with the City of Toronto, from my understanding, this is the first of its type in Southern Ontario. So.
We did change the dynamics a bit, as I mentioned. Originally, it was proposed that the staff or the ambassadors be funded by the consultants and be consultant staff. We changed that because we felt that contractors by nature don't take direction from consultants very well, and the clout isn't necessarily there. We felt that as members of the region and as given authority under the actual contract specification, the ambassadors had a greater chance of success. So we did change the model quite a bit and made them, again, staff of the region, and we gave them the authority. If Scott sees something in the field like that, he's directed, he knows he's to halt construction immediately, and a contractor can't question him. So we did change that model a little bit. They're truly the residents' advocates.
Are you applying this also to the project on Erin Hill?
Right now, no, because that project's 100% tunneled. And the big issue I have is staffing. They're full-time employees. When we went to council with this concept, we had to secure the staff resources to do that. To do that again is a tough thing to do in the public sector, but we are planning on using the ambassadors, probably Scott and Dave, on other related projects that are more community intense. We have a project ongoing in downtown Streetsville right now where the impacts to the residents are much greater. So it doesn't have the same magnitude overall, but the impact to the residents is huge. So the intent is to roll it out on other projects region-wide.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the church street.
Yeah.
But, question over here?
Sorry, I think he wasn't done yet.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, Jim, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay. What is the relation between the completion of the water system versus the completion of the sewer system?
Yeah. Thankfully, right now, no relation at all. They're
two separate projects?
Two separate projects. The capacities required in each sector, they're both semi-critical, but they both have some available float on the completion timelines. That's one thing we want to do from the start of this project is we recognize as a municipality, we were paying to advance contractor schedules. And that's a waste of taxpayers' dollars. That just shows a lack of planning on our part. And we said a long time ago we were going to stop that business. Provide the float we need, set a reasonable completion date. That was one of the risks identified during the value engineering process, is give contractors reasonable timelines. If you do, your price will come down. So we do have some float on both projects.
Yes, Dave.
I was really impressed with your ambassador program. It seems to me you have a second product that you could promote and sell. And there'd be a lot of people who would really be thankful for the jobs that are, which would otherwise impact them negatively.
It is one of the things even Scott noted is that graph we came up with. If I skip back to it, just out of curiosity here, you'll see that what we noted in the north was a lot more stronger issues around dust, working conditions, inconvenience. And this is when we did our business and institutional care program. This is when the ambassadors, this is prior to construction, No shovel on the ground, knocking on doors, saying we need to talk. And we wanted to know from them what would cause you inconvenience, what would cause you problems. On the North Project, what we found is the level of inconvenience to businesses was so great, we actually altered the specification to mandate nighttime work only. Now, what happened after that is the contractor said, well, I'm mandated to nighttime. How about if I tunnel the whole job and we call it even? We said, great, go ahead. Right? He put out one of those VECPs I mentioned. But there's one example where the ambassadors were not just valuable during construction. They were valuable in obtaining data prior to construction even being let for tender. This was during specification development. A lot of what they did during that process influenced the way the specification was created.
Any more questions? Yes, in the back.
I've been a contractor most of my life. I've worked on every expressway in Toronto, a number of the subway jobs. And I'm offended by what I hear. To me, it's just another couple of guys slowing us down at work. You know, I've survived, and I'll tell you, you guys have to be careful where you step in a job, because you're living a dangerous life. Contractors want to get the work done. Their profit depends on making a profit, on getting it done. And you guys don't seem to do anything to help. You're just going to get in the way. Two more fancy inspectors on the job. You need that like you need another union on the job, and you need another, you know, you want it to become nighttime at noon. That's what you want to do. You're going to slow everything down in construction there is. And I can't sit here, even though my bottom's getting very sore. I put up with holding up the job. There's nothing like getting it done right, done quickly, and a good profit, and everybody goes away happy. You don't seem to want to do that. You seem to want to have to do it your way, and it's easy to sit in a chair and tell somebody else you have to do it this way and that way. But when you get on the job and the mud is up to your knees and it's raining and you have to get it done, you got $100, $200 a day or whatever it is penalty,
Let's just back up.
Who cares to respond to that?
I want to start. I love controversy.
Good, okay.
One of the things we started on, and this was 2 years or a year and a half before the first job got put out to tender, okay? We wanted to do an outreach session, and we noted that in our presentation to the contracting community. And my purchasing department said, you're not allowed to do that. You have a tendering process to respect. You're not allowed to go talk to them. I said, nonsense. And we did it anyway. And I got slapped on the wrist. No, we invited all the contractors to a roundtable session.
Before the contract?
Correct. Before the contract was even put out to tender. And what we said is, guys, we have a problem. We invited the Sewer and Water Main Contractors Association. We have very close relationships with them. We meet with them. We're in front of their board twice a year with new things we want to talk about. We don't sit back in our chairs and take a backdoor approach to this. We sat with them and we asked them, we said, here's our issues. Here's what we're thinking. What do you think? We asked them to comment on exactly what you said. Here's what we're thinking about doing because we have an issue. You know what 90% of them said? No issue. We love it. Bring out the jobs. And if they would have had an issue with what we put in our specification, they would have made it that way.
You're dealing with people at the associations.
Absolutely.
Sewers.
No, we're dealing with
roads and sewers, and they're meant to reflect the feeling of their members.
Absolutely.
But they're more interested in themselves than their members. And I'll tell you, to get a job done, the guy that signs the tender and guarantees his house that he'll get it done on time for a certain price, he's the guy that you're not helping.
We met with them. We gave them the choice. We told them what our problems are. We asked them for their input. How do we solve these problems?
I'm telling you, the fewer guys we have with the inspectors and hold up the job on the job, the better it gets done, the faster it gets done. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done wrong. I just say you don't speed up the job, you just extend the life of the job.
I urge you to go talk to anybody from McNally, Tim McCleary, Tony DeMille, who's the owner of Technical. But I'm just saying, these are the guys who own these companies.
And these are the guys, why did they come to the table? My original estimates, we shaved $80 million off those estimates, even given the constraints we put in the contract. Why? Because they know we're reasonable people. They know we have constraints we have to work with. It's politics and it's issues with business. We recognize there's an impact of our work, but we didn't eliminate them from the process.
I had trouble accepting what you said.
Okay.
I think what you've said from a contractor's perspective is perfect, right? Sometimes the less inspectors, the smoother, the quicker the job happens. But we do add value in a sense that sometimes the old approach that contractors would take, oh, let's just close a road. Trust me, I hear it every day. Just let us close the road, we'll take it down, we'll get the job done quicker, we'll be in and out. But that impact and that perspective from the public's standpoint and the businesses where access is impacted, we can't allow it. So although in the contract we have these rights, I've never shut the job down.
Well, it's in the contract where you close the road down. That's simple.
That's right.
It's you coming along to make a decision on the job. We have enough people crawling over. No, I'm retired and I'm happy. My money's safe now.
Good.
One last question, because we can continue the discussion after the formal part of the meeting. If we want to have a contractor versus inspector debate.
Sure.
And any last questions?
No, I've said what I have to say.
Okay. If he's happy, oh, sorry. Yes, Kirsten.
Quick question. I worked for Habitat for Humanity for several years, and I know what a challenge it can be, even just doing a small one or two unit complex. What a challenge it can be with the community, trying to balance the needs of the contractors, the neighbors, and the local politicians. I'm so impressed with this ambassador program and all the pieces that you put into place. What did you find was the sort of most effective piece? Was it the ambassadors or the website portals or the consultation? What was it that people appreciated most or helped you further the project faster and get that done? Because I'd love to take those messages back to Habitat and help them through that process. It's never easy.
Yeah.
It's a big job.
I'll be completely biased when I answer that, so.
I would say the time we invested in value engineering and specification development was imperative. There was huge lessons learned. There was significant risk on our part, but developing those specifications to be fair, contrary to the points that are raised, we recognized doing risk management that the region was transferring risk unfairly to contractors, giving them poor data and then trying to then make them be responsible for ground conditions, you know, and things like that. So I would say that's the one factor that really shows general success on the project to date. We're only about 60% done. Is the investment in time we made in developing a new type of public sector specification.
Who's going to pay you to do that?
We did. A lot of my own time, actually.
You mean you work for nothing?
Every day.
Nothing, you do that? That's a free service?
Every day. It's ridiculous how many hours we do. You know what? I honestly, I welcome your comments, but I'm telling you, the level of outreach we did on this, risk management alone, I could have been sat back as a typical bureaucrat and say, I accept no risk. I'm going to use my same old garbage specifications, which transmits 100% of the risk for, let's say, geotechnical conditions on the contractor. No baseline report, no nothing. I didn't have to do this. I had to convince a team of lawyers who didn't want to do this, that this was the right thing to do and we would save money. Okay? To reallocate risk where the risk taker was the right person to take the risk, not the wrong person. We were transferring it all to the contracting community. We changed that.
No, it was not transferred.
It is transferred.
It depends on the consulting engineer who's responsible for the design and supervises the work. It's already done. You guys are just another fighter.
The consultant sits back and waited for us to say, what do you want?
Is this an answer or another perspective?
It's just a very short one. Can you quit this discussion and do it afterwards and have some other questions over here?
Right, exactly. That's what I was trying to do before I thank Anthony and Scott for what obviously turned out to be a most interesting presentation, especially the challenges that they faced, as their title said, in doing a major project, both the Hanlan Water Main and the West Trunk sanitary sewer project, in both an urban and a political jungle, and that's where we were heading with some of these last questions. There were certainly a lot of challenges that they faced from the environmental assessment point of view, balancing the project cost versus the impacts. The ambassador concept, which some of you may accept, a few may not accept the concept of having an ambassador project, how they manage traffic, how they dealt with public relations, this slide here, and operations management on the project, the design of the project, and the overall project management itself. The concept of a business institutional care program, this slide that Anthony has put back up on the screen, trying to reach out to businesses at a very early stage to share with the project what the impacts might be on their businesses and trying to mitigate those impacts as well. And then Anthony concluded by sharing with us some of the lessons learned. First being the value of having an ambassador. Not everybody in this room agrees with the concept of having an ambassador. And Anthony shared with us as well some of the suggestions for improvement as well. So on that note, I would ask you to join me in thanking both Anthony and Skule. That we end up with such spirited questions, but it is great that we do at this late hour. Just before we conclude, our next Lunch and Learn is 4 weeks today, Wednesday, November 11th, which happens to be Remembrance Day. The guest speaker will be Dr. Robert Galway. No, he's not a PhD. He's a medical doctor. He's the chief of orthopedic surgery at St. Joseph's Health Center. He happens to be a licensed pilot. He's an avid historian, and the topic of his presentation will be early aviation history in Canada. And he will share with us a lot of interesting history as well. All of the programs for the remainder of the year have been finalized, with the exception of the one for next May. That must be a first in the history of this program. All of the details are on the Skule Lunch and Learn website. You can go home tonight and register for the next luncheon or the one after that as well. So on that note, I declare this meeting adjourned.